Just said at the outset, delighted to be here at the County Library here in Kerry for the launch of what is a very interesting and fascinating exhibition, centenary of the Soldiers of Destiny, celebrating 100 years of Fianna Fáil, founded in 16th of May 1926. Probably one of the most successful political parties globally ever, over a 100-year period, with a very significant influence over the development of our nation and our country in all aspects of that development. And we're delighted to meet with descendants of the original TDs who were elected in 1927, both those elections in 27, the June and the September one, and in 1932 and 1933, beginning really what has been a very significant tradition of Fianna Fáil in Kerry, with great strength there, represented today by Minister Norma Foley and Deputy Michael Cahill, and many of our councillors who work so diligently on behalf of their people and those that they represent. And the secret of Fianna Fáil's strength and growth from 1926 onwards was its membership on the ground, and people in every parish in Ireland willing to contribute to political life rooted in their community, seeking to better their community. I'm going to pay tribute to Owen O'Shea here, who's an outstanding historian in Kerry, who has actually done a lot of work, not just in terms of Fianna Fáil, but also in terms of the political developments in the new state from the 1900s onwards, and also did some particularly good work on the Civil War, very significant work on the Civil War, publications which I've read, and I think the importance of micro-studies, studies of counties, is very important to give insights to the national story in terms of an emerging state. And I think Owen's research and scholarly endeavour has enlightened many of us, and I pay tribute to his objectivity and to his research capacity. And also I would say the importance of libraries in terms of the collection of archives. I would appeal to people out there, if you have any material from the past, bring it to your county archives, bring it to your library. You may not realise how important it is. It can be challenging to preserve archival material, and so it's best to give it to professionals who then make it available for other students and for people more generally to access and to learn about their past.
Good morning, everybody. Good agus tá fíorfáilte roimh go léir gach ile duine go dtí an lálann seo I Tralee and you're all very welcome to Tralee Library this morning for the opening of this, I suppose, very important and historic exhibition. This library was opened in 1983, and we've had a lot of, I suppose, great exhibitions, etc. around here. But this is the first time that a serving Taoiseach has visited the library. So Tommy Anbro Dula Shin. I'd also like to welcome Minister Norma Foley, and she's been very, very supportive of the library service over the years in her time in presentation school, as a Kerry County Councillor, and also as a minister. So very, very welcome very delighted to welcome you. We'll keep it brief. We just have two speakers here this morning. First of all, we have Dr Owen O'Shea, and to be followed by the Taoiseach, who will officially open the exhibition. So, gonna hilla while I'm Dr Owen O'Shea, con tours go hold doing Queen Taspantas, agus an ober, agus an taida, or an ishe, har liananish, Ganesha and Coraguri. So, ta fault roth on.
Gurmagad Tommy, a hishig ara Yakta, Corlori agus Aguina Ushla. An Gedal Shias Boilim Falcha Curvan Taoiseach agus Uchtran Fianna Fáil, Micheál Martin, agus Buchas a Goalish Asave and Sa Armadan, Con and Taspantas Sha Oscailt. Accordia, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the opening of this exhibition on the early years of Fianna Fáil in Kerry, in this the party's centenary year, and particularly to welcome our guest of honour, Taoiseach Micheál Martin. Taoiseach, it's a singular honour to have you here this morning. In my few years working in Leinster House many years ago, I'm not sure our paths ever crossed, but then you were in government buildings at the time, and I was beavering away in Leinster House writing press releases giving out about the government of which you were part. But I can assure you at this remove, Taoiseach, there are no hard feelings, I hope. You and I have met, however, on a few what I might describe as historical occasions in recent years, including at the Ballyseedy centenary in 2023. And I had the privilege of presenting you with a copy of my book on the Civil War in Kerry in government buildings a couple of years ago as well. I know that you and I have a shared passion for and interest in history, and particularly the history of this period. And I know that your own master's dissertation at UCD, when you studied history there, was on the subject of party politics in Cork between 1918 and 1932, mirroring in many ways the research that I've been doing in a Kerry context. And I thought it might be interesting to do a comparative analysis of politics in Cork and Kerry in the period. So perhaps, Taoiseach, someday we could team up and jointly publish a book and do that analysis and figure out who was better at politics in this period than... Before I explain just the origins and the objectives of the exhibition, I'd like to acknowledge the input and support of a number of people who made the exhibition possible. It's supported and funded fully by the Royal Irish Academy under its Commemorations Bursary programme, and in line with its aims and remit, the Academy has a long history of promoting, supporting and communicating research, and the Commemorations Bursary is designed to encourage new local research and exhibitions and publications like this. And I'm really grateful to have been chosen as one of the 10 successful applications for the fund this year. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of an esteemed member of the Royal Irish Academy, indeed one of its former vice presidents, Professor Maurice Brick, a very good friend of mine and somebody you know well, Taoiseach, and who was recently elected, perhaps more importantly, as president of the Kerry Archaeological and Historical Society, of which I'm a proud member, and we have members of the Council of the Society here this morning. I'd like to thank Tommy O'Connor, the County Librarian, and his staff for assisting in facilitating the exhibition. And as the Taoiseach mentioned to the media outside, it is so important that our public library network provides a space like this for exhibitions, and the library service is, of course, a service of the local authority, of which I'm an employee, and I'd like to welcome the Director of Service from Kerry County Council this morning, Bridget Fitzgerald. Can I thank in particular the caretaker here, Phil Hannafin, who's on a well-deserved day off, for helping to display what you see on the walls, half of which, by the way, is on the other side of those display stands, but to accommodate everybody this morning we had to push them back against the wall, so if you do have time at the end, do walk around the back. I'd also like to thank my wife Celia for helping to put the finishing touches to the display cabinets, and for putting up with large posters of De Valera, who've been sitting in our kitchen for the last 6 weeks staring at us morning, noon and night, so she's pleased, I'm sure, to have them displayed on the walls here. And finally, I'd like to thank the brand geeks, who are represented by Chris McGillicuddy this morning, for doing tremendous work on designing and creating the exhibition. I'd like to welcome Deputy Cahill and members of Kerry County Council who are with us, including former councillors Johnny Wall and Ted Fitzgerald. It's good to see you. And particularly, though, I want to welcome the relatives and the descendants of the 7 gentlemen you see on the wall to your left. We're joined representing Fred Crowley, his grandniece and grandnephew, Christina and Michael Hand, representing Thomas McAllistrom, his granddaughter Anne, a former county councillor, of course, as well as his granddaughter Maura Logue and Thomas Galvin, a grandson. Representing Eamon Cassan, his grandniece Eilish Dorr, and her son Eamon's great-grandnephew Alan, and finally representing William O'Leary, Jerry O'Leary, his grandnephew, Rose O'Leary, his grandniece, and John Carroll, a grandnephew, and his wife Mary. I'm really pleased that you could join us in particular this morning, and I hope that I've done justice to the story of your ancestors. I don't propose to say much about the content of the exhibition, which I hope will speak for itself, but as many of you will know, I've been researching and writing about history and politics for many, many years. And to say I'm a little bit obsessed with politics and elections is probably an understatement. And Professor Dermot Ferreter, when he was launching my book before Christmas, said that Owen has a disease which has no known cure, and it's called researchitis, which you can't really recover from. The reason, I just want to say, for the time frame of 1926 to 1933, I had to sort of pick a time frame, I suppose. It's because within those first 7 years, Fianna Fáil in Kerry, by 1933, had secured its highest vote in the country here in Kerry. So the popular support for the party almost immediately and continued to outpace the national average. And by 1933, the highest vote for the party in any constituency was in Kerry. And I was trying to drill down, and I suppose the exhibition aims to identify why that was. In a similar way, organisationally as well as electorally, the party was incredibly successful. In its first year in existence, Fianna Fáil, between 1926 and 27, in its first year, the party formed as many branches as Commemorations had in 4 years. So you can see, even in the press reports and in the meeting reports at the time, the incredible pace and energy which people like Lemass and Boland and those in head office brought to the organisational aspect of the party, which of course is why it became such a successful movement and organisation. And a couple of reasons which I think are important to mention. Certainly what comes across in my study of the period is the immense power of De Valera as a public speaker, as a charismatic figure, as an orator, and the reports of his meetings in the press. You can get a sense of the razzmatazz, the hype, the energy, the zeal with which Fianna Fáil members approached all of that, and which he in particular approached. He visited Kerry actually twice in the space of a couple of weeks immediately after the party was founded. And I think his recognition that abstentionism, or abstaining from the Dáil, was fruitless, was shared by Tom McAllistrom. And interestingly enough, Tom McAllistrom was the only one of the 4 then Sinn Féin TDs in Kerry to join Fianna Fáil. Paddy Cahill, Thomas O'Donoghue and Austin Stack remained with Sinn Féin. And you can read more about that relationship and Austin Stack in my forthcoming biography of Austin Stack later this year. But it's clear as well from this period that the people of Kerry and the people of the country wanted to hear more than just about the treaty and the perils of the treaty and the evils of the treaty. And Dev and Fianna Fáil candidates in particular were able to convey that and talk to people about real, tangible issues like immigration, unemployment, and the social and economic problems that they were labouring under. Another aspect that I've tried to convey in the piece is the power of the press at this time. Bear in mind that newspapers were the only means of communication for political figures, and particularly with the publication from 1928 of the Kerry Champion and the Kerry Express, both of which were founded by Paddy Cahill. They provided Fianna Fáil with a platform that they didn't have from the likes of the Kerryman and other papers which were very pro-treaty and pro-Commemorations. And finally, I think Dev had an ability to kind of harness anti-treaty sentiment in a county like Kerry in the way that other leaders or those in the other parties didn't. And I think it was like almost opening a valve when Fianna Fáil was founded in the summer of 26. There was a sort of a release of, those of the anti-treaty cohort found a party that they could support and had realised that abstentionism and the fact that Sinn Féin TDs weren't taking their seats in the Dáil was ultimately to their that it wasn't delivering on the ground. As I said, a key ambition of the exhibition is to tell the story of the ordinary men and women, mostly men, mind you, who were involved in the initial phases, although Fianna Fáil can take credit in giving Kerry its first female TD in 1945 when Honor Mary Crowley, known as Mrs. Crowley, was elected to replace her husband Fred when he died, and she won the seat in 1945. And of course her father had been John Pius Boland, Member of Parliament for South Kerry, and the first Irishman to win a medal at the Olympic Games. So that's always been my interest as a historian, to tell the ordinary stories of the ordinary people who were involved in these periods, because these were ordinary people doing extraordinary things during extraordinary times. And I've often thought of the people on the wall here who had to travel to Leinster House at a time when travel was primitive, when there was little or no communications. Thomas O'Reilly had to travel all the way from Waterville to Dublin to tend to his parliamentary duties, come back and tend to a vast sprawling constituency like Kerry at a time when, when there was little or no transport, and as I say, when communications were primitive. No more than, for example, his neighbour Fianna Lynch, who was travelling from Waterville to, and was sitting at government as a member of the Executive Council at the time. So I think whatever one's party politics or allegiances, the men and women who entered representational politics and the Dáil at this turbulent time demand and deserve our ongoing respect. So I hope that this exhibition will, if you like, bring them all to life again, and the men and women who founded Fianna Fáil a century ago, but also encourage a greater focus on the politicians of all parties at the time when the state was in its infancy, so no more than those in Labour, the Farmers' Party or Cumann na nGaedheal, ordinary men and women, few of them without any political experience, without any political skills, became members of an independent parliament in a new free state. And their achievements across the political spectrum, I believe, deserve to be remembered, particularly in a world today where the democratic values and the values of parliamentary democracy, which they campaigned for and espoused, are threatened from all sides. So on that note, I thank you, and I'd like to say a very warm welcome to An Taoiseach Micheál Martin. Thank you.
Well, ara Norma Foley agus Hachta Dála Michael Cahill, Colori Galer agus Cosfuinter an Farti agus Cosfuinter Kerry agus Gohoire Dr Owen O'Shea Balam Fairfuikus Aguadi agus Octan Quira Veliv Madden Chonan Taspontish Shaw a chuirfile an seoil go hifigiúil chugardagus le ón go háirithe agus Tommy O'Connor as Octan méidibar tá chuiristeach a goibh on the school and Tushpontus going inish. It's a genuine pleasure for me to be here this morning to formally launch this fascinating exhibition. Prepared to the highest academic standards and based on widely praised research, Owen O'Shea has provided a deep insight into the foundations and rapid growth of one of democratic Europe's most successful political parties. In fact, the party founded on May the 16th, 1926, is second only to the Swedish Social Democratic Party in terms of electoral success and impact on government over the past century. While far too many commentators have relied on the lazy idea that politics in Ireland were fixed in place in January 1922 when Dáil Éireann voted on the treaty, the facts show a very different story. They show very significant changes in political support between parties and movements, with the most successful Fianna Fáil being founded explicitly to get away from the Civil War as the sole prism through which to view politics. And I believe it's incredibly disrespectful and condescending to say that people could only see the Civil War when deciding how to vote in the decades after its cessation. It suggests people were unwilling to properly examine the failure of their own ideologies and parties to secure support from the Irish people. To understand this period properly, you have to take the time to look at a wide range of evidence with an open mind. And you have to go deeply into archives, into newspaper sources, and into a study of different elections and the personalities and the issues which define them. And we're better for this work to be focused than on Kerry, a county central to our revolution or civil war and to the building of this democratic republic over the past century. This exhibition draws on the work carried out for Owen O'Shea's brilliant thesis and book, From Bullets to Ballots, Politics and Electioneering in Post-Civil War Kerry. This work, completed, as I said, under the supervision of Professor Dermot Ferreter and published by UCD Press, is a striking example of the type of work being carried out by a new generation of Irish historians. Owen's past work on the Civil War in Kerry, which I've read, was one of the most important contributions to the national remembrance of its centenary. In a balanced and fair way, he showed how the war was more intense and prolonged here in Kerry than anywhere else. And he also underlined how the terrible savagery of certain events can be assessed and should never be forgotten. And what Owen has done is to make a major contribution to answering the question of another leading historian after the division of the Civil War. How did we so quickly move forward as a country and leave that conflict behind? I want to congratulate Owen on producing this exhibition, dealing with a core part of his work, and for securing a prestigious special grant from the Royal Irish Academy. It reveals the importance of local histories, or looking at national issues and background through county manifestations, or looking at the national frame in microcosm to a certain extent, in this case in Kerry, because it does offer fresh insights, better nuance, confirms maybe some aspects of the national story. But invariably, what I have found is it takes away from the generalities and the one-size-fits-all version of history. And that's the importance of this more microscopic study into the detail. And I would love to do a joint programme with you. I have a book published, as you know, the Freedom to Choose, but it's based on my master's degree thesis. And it's 1918, by the way, Owen, you go back a bit further now. 1918 to 1932, you did 26. But anyway, I'll leave that alone. But what I recall, and Professor Brick here helped me, it was the best new sort of fillip I got recently. I was doing a lecture for the late Professor Demercure, who was my mentor, and the head of the School of History in UCC, Hiriam Morgan, sort of said, in those days when Micheál was doing the Masters, they were like mini PhDs. And I said, thanks be to God, someone has acknowledged it at long last. Because I felt it was a PhD I did, like at the time. I was so long at it. But anyway, so I had some idea of the importance of the detail on the ground. And I just want to say that, I acknowledge in that context then the support of Kerry County Library, both in Tralee and Killarney, to County Librarian Tommy O'Connor and the entire team, how impressive it is that you have so comprehensively booked the international trend, which I think has seen libraries here become, across Europe, many libraries are becoming less important. In Ireland, we've doubled down and made them central to learning, to knowledge, and the libraries are finding new ways and important ways of opening up history and literature to the community. And I would make a general appeal to all of you, and I'm very conscious that we have relatives of the families of the initial TDs representing Fianna Fáil from 1927 to 33, Fred Crowley, Eamon Cassan, Dennis Daly, Jack Flynn, Thomas O'Reilly, Anne McEllister, Thomas McEllister, William O'Leary. They were all pioneers. If you have anything at all, any material, bring it to the library or bring it to the archives, because so much material gets lost. Libraries and archives can professionally curate, can mind them, protect them. When I read the Fianna Fáil Parliamentary Party minutes when I was doing my master's degree, they were literally on a desk on the top floor of Mount Street, not in great condition. The late Professor Keogh was really annoyed and angry, and he said to me, can you do anything? They're all out in UCD now, properly archived, with much, much more from the Fianna Fáil material. And it enables scholars and students to study subsequently in a better way. So that's a plea I would make. Any materials at all, bring them to your library or to your archives. They'll be properly catalogued and enable people. And you'll be amazed how people analyse it from a different perspective. You might think they're not that important, but actually they can be very, very important from a historical point of view. And I appreciate the representatives of all of the families of those initial TDs are here this evening. And I want to acknowledge all of you, the relatives of those deputies from those early years, members and office holders, representatives of the Kerry Archaeological and Historical Society, now the President, Morris, who's one of our great historians. Did I say or? I know I'm a Corkman, one of Kerry's great historians, and our great historians in UCD and so on. He was a great help to me in different aspects of my political life and historical background or research as well. I also want to recall and pay tribute to former colleague John O'Donoghue as a minister who was one of the great reforming ministers for justice over the last century and was always a proud voice for Kerry in national debates. And in matters of sporting, we were always quite amazed at the number of stands in sporting stadia across Kerry. But anyway, Shinshkela, I suppose. As this exhibition shows, though, from the very first moment of its foundation, Fianna Fáil was defined not by a handful of leaders,
but the remarkable commitment, as Ona said, of the largest group of members and supporters ever brought together by one political party. And this is something which external observers often miss. It can be easy to fall into thinking that the people you know in Fianna Fáil speak for all the party. In fact, the party's greatest strength has always been the range of views and the importance of members who give their time and idealism to the party while never seeking acknowledgement of this. Bottom line is, your most difficult meeting as a public representative was often the common meeting, and there was no quarter given, and you couldn't hide anywhere. And I think that was the secret to the success of the party. The other two key areas were media, in setting up the Irish press, and the Kerry manifestations of that here in terms of the Kerry Champion, I think, at the Kerry Express, and also the National Collection at that time. So there was no media when De Valera set it up with Lamass, and there was no real funding structure, and both became essential in the early decades of the party. And because De Valera, Countess Markovic, Sean Lamass, Sean T. Kelly, James Ryan, and all of those, they had no resources, no guarantee of success. They faced enormous hurdles in a collapsed Republican vote, no blueprint to follow, and the aggressive opposition of both the government and the media. And it was interesting when Owen said that Thomas McEllister was only one of the four anti-treaty TDs. That party was known as the third Sinn Féin party in academic circles. I think Richard Pine would have written a lot of work about it. It's that part that Sinn Féin had three phases, if you like: the pre-16, post-16, and then, if you like, the post-treaty Sinn Féin. But abstentionism was its calling card, and it endeavoured to set up an alternative sort of structures. It never worked. And what Fianna Fáil really then was a lot of intelligent, bright people saying, this is frustrating, we're getting nothing done. The Boundary Commission went through and so on with no serious opposition. And so, but when he left the party, if I recollect, about half, he only took half the parliamentary party, I think, with him. And so there was no guaranteed success here by any yardstick, and that's something that's forgotten. And those that came with him were ones who were frustrated. They wanted to get on and move on in terms of the country, and they were determined to do everything to build a new party, win public support. And as Ona said, 3 years after the Civil War, they believed a new direction was required, but they did focus on social, economic, cultural, as well as constitutional issues. And as he said, the speed and scale of the party's success was beyond anything that they had hoped for. And at the core of this, here in Kerry and nationally, was a focus on people and policies. And in fact, if you look at the manifestos of 27, June 27, September 27 and 32, overwhelmingly it's on economic issues. Very interesting. That's where the focus was. They wanted to win broad support, to get deep respect and support in communities, and then seeking also critically widespread membership from beyond the confines of those who had been involved in politics in the previous few years. And as I said, the 7 men who served as Fianna Fáil's deputies in the party's first years are each described by Owen in the exhibition. And I welcome the relatives from 5 of those families. I obviously can't go through all of their histories, but I will mention one of them, Fred Crowley. And I think he's a very good demonstration of the exceptional record and characters of the local leaders who secured the people of Kerry for the new party. His background is interesting because in many ways it included every element of the national revival and struggle for independence. His father, Michael, had been a founder of the Land League locally. I think he operated the Ratmore Mills. And Fred then, after attending university in England, he himself returned to Kerry, joining the Irish Volunteers and later being active in the War of Independence. He took the Republican side of the Civil War while his brother joined the National Army, something that was very familiar across the length and breadth of the country. When Fianna Fáil was founded, he was obviously then a potentially key figure to offer as a candidate of real substance. And in his 18 years as a TD, he became known for being a steady and effective representative, contributing quietly and effectively to the radical work of the party nationally and being a tireless advocate for developing Kerry. He was one of the first people to seek to promote tourism to new groups. He was president of the National Ploughing Association and promoted higher education as a member of the governing body of UCC, beginning a long tradition of Kerry public representatives on the governing body of that august body. And when he died in 1945, he was succeeded by his wife Honor, who then won her own mandate in 7 elections in a row, making a unique contribution herself. She secured investment and expansion in Kerry tourism, was the first Irish woman to serve in the Assembly of the Council of Europe, and was a member of the Council of State. The Crowleys also showed Fianna Fáil's ability to attract people from different backgrounds. So Honour's father was John Pius Boland, Nationalist MP for Kerry, barrister and the first person to win an Olympic medal, and demand that the tricolour be flown at the ceremony. That was the subject matter of an exhibition in Paris during the Olympics, the last Olympics, in the Centre Cultural, I can never get it, Irlandais, the Irish Cultural Centre in Paris. I don't know, was he the guy that raised up the flagpole and replaced the Union Jack with one former Olympian did that. A lot of Irish people won Olympics from different parts of what was then the British Empire, and they did various protests. It's regarded one of those was the first Olympic protest, had to be Irish, political protest at the Olympics, and it was a kind of Irish group. I'm not showing you this one, another one, in terms of showing our metal and so on like that. But the important point is attracting people from different backgrounds, and that was why Fianna Fáil broadened its space. And this thing about that there was just a civil war politics. Like in Cork, the Dowdall families, which were household names, one of them was appointed as senator by William T. Cosgrave in the first Commemorations Bursary. They transferred their allegiance to Fianna Fáil in 1927, and T.P. Dowdall, his brother, becomes a Fianna Fáil TD in 1932. There were margarine manufacturers, and protectionism was the issue that brought them over to Fianna Fáil at the time. And so you've manifested. Hugo Flynn was like educated, or was an engineer in Liverpool and so on. He comes back and gets elected, and so what you're witnessing is the broadening of the base to cover other elements of society, and that's not, I think, widely accepted in some of the general analysis that goes on, simplistic analysis that goes on in terms of the period. Agus le ling nom línta a raibh an afheoch an Gaelach Fíleán seol, agus fás an Phoblachtánachis, hí tionachas suntasach ag Kerry chórsaí a bhad níos mó ná méid an chúnta. I grílár an tionachar sin caithfar lín naníní a raibh sé de frihléide go feasta le Gaeltacht Kerry a chur san áireamh, agus gan áras an tradiisiún agus an cúlra náisiúnach le atá ag cúnta Kerry. Bhí rian an tionachar sin le bra go saléir I Fianna Fáil ina raibh an cultúr agus tiomatas don idachas a bhí cótáchtach sin a géirí le bra le bhéal náisiúnta. Agus na cúnta se tá tagathe chuing na blianta sin is fíor speisiúil an ní an áilte chríúil a chuig raibhéime de bhléire éon uair a héicse cuairteanna rialta fud an chúnta. Tus go raibh ascúnta in aice le Kerry ach go raibh buint mhór a gceith chomáil le glúiseachtaí a dag tionachar leanúnach Kerry, bhí de bhléire a suinas halamh sláán agus I measc bhuinter Kerry. As this exhibition shows, the party was built door to door through countless long conversations focused on how our country could find a new way forward. The defining spirit was one which believed that the poorest country in the democratic world could change its fortunes. It could build a state which would tackle poverty, provide opportunity, and have a clear voice in the world. In the final paragraph of his book, which deals with all parties and political life in Kerry during the decade after the Civil War, Owen sums up the reality very well, and I quote, "Revisiting and reopening old wounds did not serve in the long term to satisfy the needs of electors and hard-pressed citizens who were so desirous of hope and advancement and a better life. One party recognised this more than the others," unquote. And today, as a result, we have a modern, diverse European democracy. Just like every European country, our politics today is vastly different from a century ago, but it is important to take the time to look at the traditions we draw on, to look at how many obstacles have been overcome, and to look at the idealism which has delivered so much for our country. Kerry played a vital role in helping to develop a uniquely successful political party and the policies which helped our country to protect democracy while delivering social and economic progress. I again thank Dr Owen O'Shea, the Royal Irish Academy and Kerry County Libraries for helping to open up this history and make it accessible to a new generation. Go to Míle Maith Agaibh go léir.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. We, as tradition here in Kerry, we don't let any special guests go home empty-handed. So I have 2 small gifts to mark the occasion, Taoiseach, if that's okay. I signed a copy of my book. I know you've read it, but I'd like to present you with a copy. More importantly, though, I'd like to present. Many of you might have noticed that the main image that features on the exhibition is a picture of Eamon Cassan, who probably is the most successful TD of the period insofar as he became a parliamentary secretary. He was government chief whip at one point. But it's a beautiful photograph. Photographs of electioneering and election campaigns in the 20s and 30s are incredibly rare. I've spent many years trying to find them in archives. This is an image that was taken by Daniel McMonigal, whose grandson Don is here with us, appropriately holding a camera as always. But I thought it conveys some of the electioneering and the drama of the time. With the crowd, all the men in the hats, members of the press and others, and Eamon Cassan delivering a speech, which we think is in Tralee in the early 1930s. So to join me in presenting it to the Taoiseach, I'd like to invite Eamon Cassan's grandniece, Eilish Dorr, and his great-grandnephew, Alan, to come forward, and we'll present the image to the photograph. And Don, as well, we'd like to invite you to represent your grandfather as the photographer. So.
Right here for me. And again for me. Yes, please, yeah. That is
well
perfect.
Practiced.
That is spot on. One more. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Don found it in his grandfather's archive. So we were able to identify the 30 certainly essentially. So, yeah. Yes, of course. That concludes the formalities. The Taoiseach gets a free copy of my book. If any of the rest of you would like it, you'll have to buy it, I'm afraid. They're available. I know it's well read already by many of the people in the room. Former TD John Brazil.
Yes, yeah. There will be tea and coffee and light refreshments served, so Taoiseach go min an sibh tahanabas as an ócáid agus go raibh míle maith agaibh.
fine.